right, and we're doing it. Another episode of Cash's Top 5. Today I'm joined by my friend Matt Fisher. I am on during the midday on 1027 WXBM, the country station here in Pensacola, and Matt holds down the afternoons, 3 to 7. What's up, buddy?
What's going on, man?
Oh, not a lot. I'm excited we're doing a top five. I wanted to kind of figure things out and make sure that I had a good system in place before we did our first one, because I have a feeling we'll probably do these fairly regularly, just for fun for us, but also for our listeners. So you picked a great topic for our first top five, because as I've been doing these, I've been trying to keep up, keep notes of what's a good topic to do and keep those in my phone. And what are we doing today, Matt?
It was hard to make up this decision. So I went, though, old school. I go top five childhood toys and games.
Which is insanely hard,
Very
which
difficult.
is a very privileged thing to say, because some kids are like, I grew up with no toys or games, or, I had my imagination,
Right?
but lucky enough to grow up with some toys and some games. So let's jump into it. Our favorite top five games and toys of all time. What do you got at number five?
All right. Well, number five for me is kind of like a combo piece because it's a baseball, bat, and glove. Because you can't really have just one of those. I mean, you can, but it's just not nearly as fun. But because we grew up, when we grew up in a small town, Northwest Iowa, and we had an alfalfa field directly across the street from our house. So we had this wide open space, and whoever owned it, I think the bank owned it, and they were just, using that alfalfa to make $50 a month or whatever off of it,
Yeah.
And so they let us mow a giant space of it, and we had our own baseball field directly across the street from
So
my
you
house.
had Field of Dreams in Iowa.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, that's what we had going on. It was the perfect setup. We played baseball every day in the summertime. And it's funny because I said the alfalfa field, but it all started in the backyard when we were younger. And then we expanded, the older we got, and hit the ball a little bit further and, try to break less windows by moving across the street where there's no
Yeah.
But, so the baseball, the bat, the glove, playing catch, all those things were essential to my childhood.
Man, I didn't really think sports because I wasn't totally an inside kid. I love basketball. I had a hoop out front in the yard because we grew up on a cul-de-sac. So out in the street, you could shoot until a car came by, and they have to get up on the sidewalk, let them pass. So I didn't think, but
game off situation.
Game on. Yeah. Great baseball. We'll go a baseball kit. We'll call it
There you go.
bat, the glove, the ball. Strong start. My number five for you is kind of obscure. It's more of a deep cut. I don't know that a lot of kids had this, but we'll find out. My number five was a VTech laptop power pad. Any idea what that is?
My kids had a VTech of some sort. Obviously, I would imagine a little more high tech than the VTech
later generation
back in the day.
Yeah,
but I do understand what it is. Yes.
Yeah, it's essentially a laptop for kids, but there were word searches, there were riddles, there were number games. I mean, it was kind of nerdy, I'm not going to lie. But there was all kinds of cool, there was like Tank Battle. It was a lot of fun. It was one of those that you could tote around with you. So I would like take it to the babysitter. I would sneak it into school with my book bag. It looked like it might be kind of an actual real laptop, but not really. Like it wasn't the weird colors it is now. Like I feel like all those things are bright green and pink and orange, all the stuff today, but it was dark gray with a little button that snapped it closed. And I would just hours, and it had the most annoying voice as like the announcer, like 5, the answer is 5. And you'd want to smack her, but you still kept playing because it was that much fun.
See, I'm thinking the first time I had any experience with a toy similar to that, I mean, we're talking super old school. I think the screen was dark green and the letters were light green, and that was the most you got out of it. It was essentially like the first, computers you could ever touch as a kid.
Yeah, it was like you're hacking into a system in an 80s movie or something.
Right.
Okay, strong starts. I was trying to think beforehand what would make your list. baseball kit number 5. What do you got at number 4?
Okay, so number 4, this is completely off the wall because I know this is a game we created as kids, and it's a kind of an offshoot of baseball. But see, before we transitioned to the big field, we had to get rid of the baseball or the tennis ball that we were playing with in the backyard. So we created a game called Hit Ball, which is it's a combo of baseball and kickball together. And if you're rolling through a Walmart or a Target, you got that giant bin of vinyl like balls, like they're almost like the size of a kickball, but they're not the rubber, they're that cheap, soft,
Yeah.
vinyl. Well, we played with that ball. So imagine being the pitcher who had to throw it like a normal pitch to a guy with the bat, and that thing gets smoked back up the middle at you at
Yeah.
9 million miles per hour. But so once you hit the ball, then it was kickball rules. You could throw the ball to get them, to hit them, to get them out. But we created this game. We would play this one. This is the one that allowed more people to play because you didn't have to have the glove. You didn't have to be able to catch and throw too hardcore.
Right.
But yeah, hit ball was the game, man. We mastered that thing.
Damn, dude. I'm feeling really inadequate right now. You had such an active childhood. I'm like, well, I sat in the corner. I was on a laptop. like baseball. We had hit ball. We were making up stuff. We had so much activity going on.
Right?
All right. Baseball number 5, hit ball number 4. I'm waiting for space ball for number 3, but we'll get there. My number 4 for you was a Game Boy game. I didn't want to just say Game Boy. I felt that was a little too vague.
Sure.
Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins.
Wow.
Yes. I had, everybody had Tetris on Game Boy.
Right.
And I think I had Zelda at some point, but Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins, you just basically went through different levels collecting these coins, and Wario was the big bad guy at the very end of the game.
Yep.
And there was like a space level, there was a level underwater, there was a level where they made you mini, so there's these giant ants you got to hop on. It was cool, man. It held my attention pretty well, but I would play forever and ever and ever. Probably should have gone outside a little more, but
Dude, I played plenty of Game Boy as a kid, and when they came out with the screen that fit over top that had the light and the magnifying glass, when you could, all of a sudden that changed playing the Game Boy.
Quick little sidebar about accessories. We may get into this a little further down the road, depending on how our lists shake out. But when I was a kid, I was big into action figures, and I didn't put action figures on this list. I guess those were technically toys, but I had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And it came with Shredder, and it came with Splinter, and like Bebop and Rocksteady, and all the whatever.
Yep.
And apparently I didn't know this as a kid, but I was so young, my mom took all the accessories, like the swords and the sticks and all the little pieces that went with the turtles. She kept them back because they were a choking hazard.
No way.
Yeah, which I understand.
Right.
But it was probably a couple years later, I was older and I was playing with them. I was like, man, I kind of wish I had Leonardo's sword. I wish I had Donatello's bow staff. And she's like, oh yeah, I forgot. And she went and got them. It was like double present. It was amazing. So she's like, oh yeah, here's this plastic bag, and just dumped it out. And there was all the cool weapons and accessories, and there's a catapult. And I'm like, oh, this is way more fun. So
that explains your childhood a lot more. Like your mom didn't trust you well enough to have the accessories. So that leads us into a whole new avenue of what you did before that led her to not trust you anymore.
This is turning into therapy now. I don't like it at all. Let's keep going. Let's move forward.
All right, fair enough.
Okay, so your 5 was baseball. Your 4 was hit ball, made up game there in Iowa. What do you got at number 3?
Number 3. Now this is classic old school kid Matchbox cars.
Yeah. Good one.
And I go with them because, like old Joe Diffie tells us, spend, 100,000 miles on my knees. It's the same setup with the Matchbox cars. I would play with those nonstop. We had my mom, bless her, she had the greatest way of collecting these. She had a 5-gallon bucket that used to it was a Tidy Cat 5-gallon bucket. So it was an old kitty litter bucket.
Yeah.
You put them all in. It had a lid. It was, very well maintained. But man, I mean, every day when we were younger, before we started playing the baseball and things like that, every day I would even lay stationary on the floor and just back and forth with the same car for like 20 minutes. Like I was, it just Matchbox cars were the dream at that time.
Oh, absolutely. And things like that, when you're young enough, will hold your attention forever. Like I remember playing with like little the Green Army soldiers.
Right.
Like if you were to sit and try to do that now, you'd be like, my
Like one of the
imagination.
worst toys ever.
Yeah. But when you're 7, it's amazing.
Right.
Now, was there a difference for you? Was Matchbox better than Hot Wheels? Was there not a difference?
I guess Mom bought them. I just took whatever she got. I mean, I probably had a good mixture of Matchbox and Hot Wheels. To me, they're essentially the same thing. It's the Kleenex, conundrum there, where everybody calls it Matchbox, but there are Hot Wheels in there.
That's a good point. That's strong. Okay. My number 3 for you is an actual kind of, it's not a board game, but it's more of a game. Did you ever see or play the game called Mr. Mouth?
I don't think so.
So it's kind of a deeper cut, but it was essentially a frog's head, and there were 4 arms. Like think about Hungry Hippos, how that's kind of set up. There's the center, and then there's an arm that way and 2 arms that way.
Yep.
And you had a little hand that you put a little plastic fly on the hand, and as the frog head spun, his mouth would open and shut. And so you would try to time your little catapult thing to flick the fly into the mouth. And it was like blue, green, yellow, red, or whatever. And if you got all your color flies into the mouth, you won. And I love that game more than anything. It was so much fun. But you had to have people to play with you. It was super boring even if it's just you versus another person, wasn't that great. That's kind of why I maybe knocked it down a couple spots. But when you had 4 people, a full band playing, and other people wanting to get in, or I say people, kids, it was so much fun.
How did you get out and get in then? If you had, like, say you had 6 kids waiting to play, I mean, what was the criteria to get into the game?
Whoever got the fewest in had to come out, and the next person up got to come in.
All right.
So you got to stay in unless you were the low man on the totem pole, and then each time you'd have to give up the sticks.
So the key is to not suck.
I think you just described every game. The key here is you want to use a little bit of skill. There's going to be a little bit of luck, and don't suck. That's the key. That's the key thing. Yes. So yeah, Mr. Mouth. Check it out. Super fun. Questionable name. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, I don't know that I want my kids playing with something called Mr. Mouth, but it was a frog. Okay. We've got baseball, hit ball, Matchbox. We are clearly boys growing up. What do you have? What do you have in number 2?
All right. Well, this one obviously steps it up one more notch, because this is the game changer. Because so this would have been, I think, 1990 maybe, when the Super Soaker 100 came out.
Oh man!
And when I'm talking game changer, like before, squirt guns were just like a pump. Like you just you pull the trigger, it squirts out water, maybe a foot and a half.
It was a little pistol.
Yeah. The Super Soaker, all of a sudden, now we're talking water pressure, air pressure. And that changed the game. When we started rocking the Super Soakers, like when one kid in the neighborhood got it, that changed the water wars. So now every kid's begging their mom for the Super Soaker, and then everybody gets the Super Soaker, right?
Yeah.
So the next step is that, that one I think lasted maybe a year or two, just the original 100, and then they upped the game where it had the double barrels, the double water containers.
Oh yeah.
What we learned that kept the Super Soaker 100 at the top of the list, better than all of the upgraded versions. What kept it at the top was you could hook a water hose up where the nozzle to the bottle would screw into the gun. You could take a water hose and screw it in there and turn the faucet on. So we had these giant bushes right by the front steps, and between the bushes was where the hose was at. So I'd screw that thing onto the gun, and you didn't have to pump it to build pressure because you had the constant water pressure.
Yeah, you just
So
auto.
yeah, all of a sudden it became a machine gun water gun, unlimited water. And so I would just hide there, and as people come by, you just blast them quick. I mean, I know you could use the hose, but that's like cheating, like the actual hose. I had to have the gun, but that's what, the Super Soaker 100, game changer when it came to water wars.
So, man, that's such a good pick. I didn't think of that. I probably should have that on mine because the amount of time you could waste with a water war. Did you keep it separate, water balloons and super soakers, or did you mix?
Oh no, it was whatever you could get your hands on was game. And so but if the water balloon problem is you're a sitting duck while you're filling and tying those things. We didn't have that contraption now where you hook it up to the faucet and it fills up 100 at once. They all pop off tied and ready to go. Like you had to go one at a time. And then of course, as you put it over the nozzle, it breaks, and then you're hosed for that one, and you got to keep going.
So I have a little bit of a bummer from my childhood related to water guns.
Uh-oh.
Did you ever have the Marauder? Does that sound familiar to you?
I think I've heard of it.
So it's kind of like what you're talking about. I grew up, being a little kid, you'd have the little pistol, little squirt gun, and then maybe you'd get one that had like a little pump action, but it wasn't that great. Because then they started rolling out the holy shit super soakers.
Right.
Like you're talking about. So I remember asking I want like a cool super soaker. I want a cool water gun. And it was probably my birthday because I don't know that it would have been a Christmas present. But either way, I was a little kid. My folks got me this water gun called the Marauder. And it was huge. And it was like steel looking, like it was gray, but it looked like kind of like steel, like a fake gun in a movie. And it had like the orange tips or whatever. And it had this real big reservoir on the back, but it didn't have a trigger.
There was a trigger.
Yeah. There was a little thing on the side of the gun that kind of popped out, and you had to.
No way.
The water would just kind of out. I'm like, this is the worst goddamn gun I've ever seen in my life.
Did it spray further the faster you spun it?
Maybe, but not much. Like it never had like real pressure behind it. I remember thinking, looking back on it now, we probably didn't have a ton of money growing up, so it was probably at the bottom of a clearance bin. And my folks are wonderful people. They just want me to be happy, and they whatever. But at the time, I'm like, this is some shit, man. Like everybody, everybody's got legit super soakers, and I'm out there like, hold on, like I'm shooting a movie in the 20s. Oh my god, yeah, the Marauder.
And in order to get somebody wet, you have to be within arm's reach, or blasting you with water the whole time.
Yeah, I would have been better off just unscrewing the top of the reservoir and just dumping the water out of the gun, as opposed to actually doing that. Man, that's a good number 2. I'm trying to think what your number 1's going to be. My number 2 for you is, I don't think it's a deep cut. You may not have heard of it, but I feel like it was popular. It's one of those that it always comes up on nostalgia pieces. Like, remember the 90s, and it's this toy?
Yeah.
The 2XL robot.
2XL robot.
Never heard of it?
I'll probably remember it once you explain it.
Or you will Google it afterwards. But yeah, no, it's a little robot, a little plastic gray robot with a little blue, like he's got black eyes with a red light and blue plating on the plastic. And you put a cassette tape in where his stomach would be, I guess. Sure. He's got 4 buttons on the bottom, and it's like trivia. And which of these baseball players was a real person? Jimmy Snickers, Babe Ruth, or John Mars, or whatever. And you'd be like, Babe Ruth. And then it would, cassette tape would roll ahead to be like, good job, you got it right. If you got it wrong, you had to go back. And it was just so much fun. And it was, and when you got something right, your prize or your reward was a terrible pun joke. That when you first start playing, you're like, oh, this is cute, this is fun. And then after like 20 minutes of it, your dad's like, shut that thing off.
the beginning of the dad jokes.
That's where they came from. They came from 2XL in the early 90s. But And what's cool about that, I hadn't seen one 20 years, longer than that, 25 years. It's been since I was a little kid that we had it. My sister found one and got it for my birthday a couple years ago. And or maybe last year, I don't remember, but yeah, we put the batteries in, started it up, beep, 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 and had the cassette tape in. I was like, oh, it just transported me back to childhood. And we did it for about 5-10 minutes. We're like, okay, we're done with this.
That was good.
Yeah, like that's enough. That's good. So yeah, 2XL robot is my number 2. So to recap, before we give our number ones, we've got for Matt Fisher, baseball, the kit, bat, glove, ball. Hit ball, which is a hybrid baseball, kickball, melee, every man for himself.
Yep.
Matchbox cars at number 3, the Super Soaker at number 2. And see, I struggled with what do I include? Do I want board games? Do I want more toy? Do I want more this? So I'm curious what your number 1 is. What do you got?
Well, so this is super, like, I would have thought this would have been predictable to be on a top 5 list for me, who was born in 1980, because, I mean, this was the toy, and it's the G.I. Joe.
Oh, man, you're going classic.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
So the same Tidy Cat bucket that had all of my box cars in it also had my what would I refer to as 5B in Legos, had another one with Legos, and then we had the one with all of the G.I. Joes in it. And it's funny that you brought up the accessories thing, because I was never an accessory guy. Like when we had, and I'm not talking the 12-inch old school, 70s G.I. Joe. I'm talking 82. They came out with the 3 3/4-inch G.I. Joe. That's the one, like the real hardcore. But like the guns or like hats or any accessory that came with these things, I tossed them in the trash. I wanted nothing to do with those things.
Really?
It was
so
too much.
What'd you do with them?
Just with the G.I. Joes?
Yeah.
We just use the imagination, man. Like I can imagine that my G.I. Joe is going to shoot that other G.I. Joe. I'm fine with that.
You don't need a fake little plastic gun. You can just picture that and do the sound effects with your voice.
Right on. But see, it went so deep with the G.I. Joes. Like we had a sandbox in the backyard, which should also be on the list anytime you talk about, toyhood, things like that. But we had a sandbox that after we all, my brother and I aged out of the sandbox, my mom dug it up and put in a rose garden in the backyard. Well, in the process of tilling up the garden, she found probably 10 G.I. Joes that had been buried in the sandbox. And she goes, thinking she spent, $6 a G.I. Joe or whatever it was. Like, why did you bury it? You said, he died in battle. We buried him.
Yeah, you have to honor G.I. Joe.
Yeah, you don't leave a dude out there on the ground to rot. You got to bury him. So we don't.
What a broad.
And then I don't know if did you play with G.I. Joes as a kid?
Oh yeah.
So you had the structure of the G.I. Joe. The legs were connected to each other. The waist was separate. The torso, the arms, the head. So there was that rubber band almost that hooked into the legs and went up into the head of the G.I. Joe. So after a while, those things would rot, fall apart. The G.I. Joe falls apart. So we would lose a leg or a waist. And we just started creating like Frankenstein monsters out of the bits and pieces left over from some of the cool guys that you wanted to keep, like for the most part. So you just created them after the fact.
Yeah.
So our collection of G.I. Joes were gnarly, half buried, and then I'll go so deep. I mean, because just so you know that do you ever hear of the USS Flag for G.I. Joe? Okay,
I don't think so.
Somewhere in the mid 80s, I believe, G.I. Joe put together an aircraft carrier toy, 7 feet long. I mean, it's legit, full 7 feet. Your guy, I mean, you could it fit up their jet. You could have your guys in the game or in the boat. Mm-hmm. My parents bought my brother and I this thing, and you don't think about it when you're a kid. I go back to look at it, and brand new, that thing was like $103, and I'm talking like 1984 3 or 4 maybe.
That's so much money for a little kid's toy.
Yeah, dude, you fast forward that to now. I did the math on it. It's like $250 value today.
Oh my God.
I don't know. And my parents had 3 kids. You know, my mom at that time wasn't really working. She was kind of at home staying home because we had a sister that's much younger than us.
Yeah.
I don't know how they bought it. I honestly don't. But we had
Wow.
it. It was one of the coolest toys ever. And my brother and I will text each other pictures of the USS flag from time to time just to relive the memories of how awesome that toy was.
Oh yeah. Well, and it also sounds like you guys might have been like Sid from Toy Story, all the different mangled types of toys that you
Yep.
had. But man, that's impressive. All right. Well, my number one is along a different vein because I will say I am not a gamer. Like I don't have a PlayStation, I don't have an Xbox. I kind of played the 90s stuff with my dad. My dad is, he's older and he's much more of a gamer than I ever was. But number one for me, and it's not really close, I don't think. Nintendo 64, Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Nice.
That game holds up. I've got it on a DS to play when I'm bored sometimes. I brought it with me. I don't, it's kind of, if I'm just kind of bored and, it's not football season, there's nothing really on, I'll be like, yeah, I'll play a little bit for just to kind of pass the time. But such a great game and just iconic. I mean, there were other fun games on there too. Like we had the Jeopardy game on N64, of course, the football games. GoldenEye was
Oh,
huge.
I played that a lot in college. That was what we played. We played GoldenEye
Yeah.
every college. I remember that.
GoldenEye multiplayer with the big heads and the color shots, and it was so much fun. But Ocarina of Time, such a great game. Now, a little before we get to our honorable mentions, we'll run it back. Matt Fisher, your top 5. These are toys and games of all time from childhood: baseball, hitball, Matchbox cars, Super Soaker, and GI Joe. Number 1, that's a great pick. That's a classic pick. My 5 for you: the VTech laptop power pad, because there are kids who are nerds growing up. Super Mario Land 2 on the Game Boy, Mr. Mouth, the Frog Game, 2XL Robot, and Zelda Ocarina of Time. I think you said Legos before. What didn't quite make your list?
The Super Nintendo and Super Mario Brothers 3.
That's with the raccoon tail.
Yeah, you remember I know you remember this, the movie The Wizard. Fred Savage. Did you ever see this movie? I feel like
maybe not.
I am quite so. Fred Savage.
There's a movie you've seen that I haven't. I'm shocked.
Yeah, dude. Wizard. Look it up. It's about it was how partially how I believe how Nintendo launched the Super Nintendo. So this game, the movie was about how about some kids traveling across the country to get to a Super Nintendo like world championship contest. And it's probably been 30 years ish since I've seen this movie, so I'm probably remembering it completely wrong. But that was and so Fred Savage, obviously young Fred Savage, is in this movie, and yeah, dude, you got to watch it. It's probably not even a good movie, to be honest with you, but
if there's a lot of nostalgia in it, though, it sounds like.
Yeah, but I believe that was honestly how they launched the Super Nintendo, Super Mario Brothers 3, because the Super Nintendo, when that thing came out, was like top of the line. We had one family in the neighborhood whose dad ran the feed mill or whatever it was, and they had cash, and they bought the Super Nintendo, but only certain kids in the neighborhood were allowed to come play it. And my problem with this is I was allowed, but my best buddy in the neighborhood was not allowed.
That's a bummer.
That put me on the no play list because of association. And but I ended up getting the Super Nintendo myself down the road, and it was all better. But at that moment in time, that was tough to have to sit there and not play.
You know what? Now that I think about it, I've got Ocarina of Time at number 1. Breath of Fire on Super Nintendo was an incredible game. It was kind of like a a precursor to the Final Fantasy games where you've got like 4 characters and they take turns fighting the bad guy or whatever.
Sure.
And you keep equipment on you, like you upgrade your sword, you upgrade your shield, you upgrade your armor and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, Super Nintendo, great. What else? So for you, I know you grew up a little, more 80s than 90s than I did, but Crossfire,
The game, like
the game Crossfire, where you had like the
where you
little
shot
metal
the
pellets.
marbles? Yes. Yes. And because you're trying to, you got that one spin thing in the middle of it, or you're trying to hit then move that thing around, aren't you?
Yeah, you're trying to get it so it goes into kind of like soccer. You're trying to get it into the other person's side of the board. It didn't quite make my list because I grew up with one sister, and as you can imagine, I was a terrible older brother for a stretch of time, and she was not interested in playing any games with me, but
Right.
especially not Crossfire, where I would just pelt her with the metal marbles. But I do remember that being a fun game. Did you have any other honorable mentions?
Not, you know what? To me, my honorable mentions all came down to video games, just the different video games that I found that I loved. We played Ken Griffey Jr. baseball a lot for the Super Nintendo, and then when the PlayStation rolled around, my brother and I loved the game Driver. Did you ever see the game Driver on PlayStation?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of, to me, that was the precursor to like the Grand Theft Auto games.
Yeah.
So we got that for Christmas one year. You know how you have that 2-week window where you're out of school, and we completely finished all the missions in that 2-week window. And so 2 weeks into owning the game for Christmas, it was worthless because there was nothing left to do on it.
Yeah, that was a lot of those games. Because side missions and stuff like that wasn't a thing yet. It was like, no, once you're done with the game's over.
Yep.
So for board games, because I'm a board game guy, I really am. I love Trivial Pursuit, Monopoly, Sorry, Trouble. I loved all those games growing up. But my favorite one was probably Clue. That was a good time. It was tough because you had to get the whole family to play to make it even fun.
Right.
Because again, I just with the one sister, so it would take having mom, dad, her, and me to play for it to be a good time. But yeah, that was a good time. And also, I don't know if you had one of these. This one I felt needed to be brought up. It didn't have a long shelf life. It kind of fizzled pretty quickly. But the Talk Boy from Home Alone.
From Home Alone, jeez, Talk Boy.
It's the little handheld
recorder. Yeah,
the recorder. Yeah.
They sold them. I mean, I thought it was just a thing that was in Home Alone.
No, they actually sold Talk Boys. My mom got me one, and it did all the stuff it did in the movies. It kind of slowed things down. It would speed up. Yeah, and you would just talk into it and then play it back. It was pretty damn cool. But again, after a couple minutes, you're like, okay. What else does it do? Nothing? Okay, we're good.
This is it.
Oh, man. Well, that was good. That was a fun time, man. Recap again. Top 5 for Matt Fisher. Baseball, the ball, bat, and the glove. Hit ball at number 4. Matchbox cars at number 3. The Super Soaker at number 2. G.I. Joe at number 1. Fantastic list. Matt, where can people find you if they want to come follow you?
At Matt Fisher Radio, Twitter, Instagram, you can find me there. And I always love a good conversation.
That's right. I know you do. Well, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. We'll do another one again soon.
All right, man. Sounds good.